Good morning. Thank you so much, Vera, for the invitation. My name is Helena Canhão. I'm the Dean of Nova Medical School. Now we have here a new table about health and biobanking. And we will have the two talks. First, Michael and then Anna. And in the end, we will discuss both presentations. So, Michael Mayrofer. She's the BioMed-AI head of LSI. She's a social scientist by training and educated in Vienna, Louvain, Essex, and Paris. And in 2010, she received her PhD from both the École des Études, Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales and the University of Vienna. She was involved in the coordination of the BioMed-AI preparatory phase and is experienced in management of national and international research projects. Since 2011, she has spearheaded the Code of Conduct for Health Research Initiative, considering the specific features of processing personal data in health research. She was co-director general for BioMed-AI between February and August of 2020, and now she serves in several EABs, most notably as chair of the Human Brain Project EAB. And she's heading the LSI from the BioMed-AI. Thank you.
Thank you for the kind introduction. So in short, I'm the representative of a European research infrastructure that is owned by about 25 member states and heavily political because it's the membership fee paid by the Ministry of Research or Health that determines in which direction we should go. And BioMed-AI, horrible acronym, stands for Biobanking and Biomolecular Research Infrastructure, and ERIC hints to the legal entity, European Research Infrastructure Consortium. It's the easiest described as International Organization Light. So I'm talking here as a social scientist with a little bit of a political knowledge in the making of research infrastructures for biobanks and what biobanking and AI have to do with each other. And doing so, it is always a good idea to tell a story. So when did biobank come up as a term? Biobanking as such became a thing in the biomedical profession in the 90s. The term biobanks was first introduced in 97. And then in the media in 2009, it was presented as one of 10 ideas that are changing the world right now. What was interesting at the time was that it was still used as treasure trove metaphor. It was still used, it's a bank, you can trust the bank. Of course, the narrative changed very, very fast because, as you remember, in 2009, also the economic crisis hit, so suddenly to talk about banks was not such a good idea any longer. Fast forward 10 years, biobanking is still changing the world. What has changed in the narrative is that AI is also introduced. This is the public discourse we're speaking about. I've highlighted here some words to make the differentiation from the earlier statement, that here we speak of the evolution of biobanks. They have become something more rather than sample and associate data collections, rather the opposite. It's now the data that is becoming much more important. And it is rapid. The speed of what happens and how it happens overtakes many of us, especially the biobanks, because very often the funding of biobanks within the institutions of the clinics at the intersection between research and healthcare makes it very often difficult to pinpoint what is the actual budget of a biobank. Hence, the speed of technology that is needed to maintain it often poses a lot of challenges financially, but also, as I will argue, ethically and socially. The argument here that is made is transforming nations. And I find that very interesting because I see that in science policy today, nationalism, especially with the security threats, is coming into the game. However, what remains since the late 90s until today is there is this transformative potential that biobanks indeed showcase and will continue to showcase. And I argue because exactly of this intersection between healthcare and research. Very often the samples and data come through the healthcare sector, and the studies that are done with it are within research. So a lot of regulations and a lot of considerations apply. One last time, contrasting now the text to the image. The image, what you see to your left, is the article, the cover page actually, from the article of 2009. And here we moved from the globe, from space, I would even argue, now into the data bits, the imaginary of how biobanks work. I find that particularly ironic because one of the key regulations that is in the making in the EU, the European Health Data Space and the Governance Act, talk about the space, but what the space is still in definition, I would argue, especially what it will mean in practice. Some brief images how biobanks look like. Very often you see it with robotics, with freezers, sometimes people taking out the samples from the nitrogen tank, hardly ever yet linked to the data side of it, or a joint picture that really portrays it. That will happen, we will see how. What I want to point out with this picture is, of course, the golden standard in communication is when you do something, can you explain it to your grandmother? And for 15 years, I failed in that. And eventually, my grandmother had asked me, well, can you show me a picture of a biobank? How does it look like? And those were the pictures I showed her. She picked out one, the one with the nitrogen tanks, and said, this looks like a brewery. I like beer, therefore I like biobanks, it's fine. Now, where I want to head with that is also that what is important in building up a biobank, maintaining a biobank, is always underlying trust. It needs to be set up with the right legal basis. It needs to have the right security measures, ethical oversights, compliance, technical means, data quality, and standards. But at the end of the day, we don't know what actually sells to those people to whom the citizens and patients we actually very often claim to do the things for. And that's the part and bit of science communication that we have to have, need to do. That also means that, when necessary, leave it to the experts. So don't do a paper dump out of pride, especially not to your grandmother of all the papers that you have written, but show a picture. And whatever works for them, or whatever misunderstanding that might be out there, also needs to be addressed. So the fears and hypes that we might have as professionals, in my case, social science, might actually not be the ones that are there really from the citizens, and how can we take them on board? That will be a huge question, especially with the realization of the EHDS. Now, coming more into the topic of biobanks again, key infrastructures in the area of datification, it is embedded in the life sciences. It is not the bubble of the biobanks per se. Of course, we as biobankers, we also as biobanking infrastructure often forget that. No, it's in the broader field. And what is there is that the data turn is in the whole of the life sciences, is everywhere surrounding us, everywhere in societies with the apps that we use. The transformation clearly led to the reconfiguration of major infrastructures such as BioMed-AI to turn into data infrastructures, again with the support of research, but also innovation, not knowing yet what that might be. And here, the legal implications of it will be a huge topic for the future, because in very many cases, the legal departments responsible for it are the legal departments at the, say, medical universities, where the biobank is situated as one of its units. However, very often, and only in a few cases it's not, very often the legal departments are heavily understaffed. So what you can practically do is really knock at the doors of directorates of the policymakers. There needs to be funding for the legal departments to actually do their job and to change the culture in not only to protect the institution, which is the basic thing that they can currently do now, but to enable innovation, to enable research. A balance needs to be made, but it needs to be a mandate that the legal department is aware of and has the resources actually to fulfill it. Now, biobanks are crucial infrastructures in terms of data sharing and data flow, and are here exactly at this intersection between the GDPR, AI Act, EHDS, and many others. And it's a constant negotiation process how to comply with that. The advancement of AI-based technologies has further accelerated, of course, big data research in the life sciences, and there is the realization, bloody hell, there is a lot of garbage. So data quality remains one of the key activities. That is equally true when it comes to the health data spaces, because yes, it has the potential to transform the life science, medicine, and healthcare in particular. And here, biobanks can play a role because there is decades of experience in data and sample quality, how the community bottom-up can lead and implement certain standards. However, it takes, as so often, resources, time, political will, and all the rest of it. And in order to set it up in a trusted way, you need to do it in an ethically and legally compliant way. So whenever something is set up, involve the lawyers early. And very often things are done in a research setting, as we also heard this morning. There are multiple databases and solutions set up, and I would call that very often the my baby problem. We have fantastic solutions in research projects. However, other projects might equally have fantastic, beautiful solutions. Each baby is beautiful. And if you try to convince the other, who was not part of the consortium, to buy into yours, you're basically telling the other communication-wise, your baby looks so ugly, I don't want to look at it ever. So that's not a good idea, as we know. In that sense, those items need the community bottom-up, but also top-down, the political investment and will really to standardize. That said, there are certain activities going on. BioMed-AI is involved in the EHDS project 2 pilot, where we are assessing different access forms. And the imaginary was brilliant. Finland is wonderfully advanced. We just take the access template from Finland, translate it, and it will work magically all over Europe. Of course, that is not the case. It fits for Finland, for their context, their science culture, their legal requirements. It needs to be heavily adapted, and something new needs to be found that could then be called European. So standardization has a caveat, that is, standardize not necessarily everything, but make it interoperable wherever useful. And where AI comes in is that AI in health poses the ethical, legal, and societal challenges in requiring a deeper understanding of concepts such as trust and trustworthiness. So we've heard many of the items in the course of the last days, but what I want to particularly point out is the agreement that we have here, that at the very end it has to be the responsibility of a qualified person to make the call, so that AI is a tool. And very often it is understood as something still, especially in the public, I would say, that either creates a dystopia or will lead us magically to world peace. And no technological tool has ever done that. Now, the middle way is, of course, the way forward. Whatever that is part of negotiation of us as a society. What are the access restrictions, data sharing? I love the example of how to consolidate the AI Act with the GDPR. I could not agree more on that. And what is additionally needed is the values we commit to. How can we balance those two acts? And it will continue. To be more practical, colleagues and I have come up with 10 commandments for ethical medical AI. For the sake of time, I just invite you to follow the QR code. But what remains impossible, what remains necessary, is to situate the needs in terms of implementation to make it ethical in the local again. In that regard, we also looked, or my team also looked, in certain aspects in research projects where we interviewed coders in their knowledge of AI and algorithms. For them, it's machine learning. AI is far off somewhere, and it's a term that is just out there. However, we also see that the awareness of especially biases becomes more and more important. So the call is, yes, we need training. No, not everybody needs to become an expert of AI, especially when you work as a medical professional, but at least a decent understanding of whom to turn to if there is an issue. So how can we unlock the potential of AI? So biobanks for the future. It requires that we understand that the infrastructure building is not only a technical thing, but also a social thing. What are the values that our institutions, our profession, our country puts forward into it? How do we take the citizens that might be critical on board with it? I'm personally very critical about the idea of data altruism because it somehow constructs on the European level this idea if you're not willing to share your data, then you're a bad citizen. I don't think this is the intention, but that is something where we have to have a conversation about because it remains a fundamental right not wanting to be part of certain activities. Whether this is done with AI or not is in that sense secondary because it is a tool which we have to manage and apply appropriately. So 2 more slides to go. Brief results from the EBW workshop, Ethics AI, Hypes, Hopes and Risks, where colleagues from patient representation, LC, and the medical profession and biobankers came together and said, well, AI is wonderful because it can take away all the boring tasks that we don't want to do. It can increase efficiency, but we want to understand how and what is done. We understand there will remain a black box argument, but at least it needs to be good enough that we can explain it again to our grandmothers. Then the importance of high quality data. I don't want to dwell again on garbage in, garbage out argument. But to also include and consider the stakeholders that are part of it, especially advocating transparency, patient rights, and research accessibility. And what transparency means, again, needs to be negotiated. It should not be the data dump that Google did so often. Here you have all your raw data and source data and the code that maybe the person receiving it cannot read. So that would be hiding a tree in a forest. But rather to understand what is it actually that the person asks, and then answering appropriately. All this will contribute and will continue and will never stop, because it will remain a moving target, and eventually there will be something after AI. So do we see AI really as a tool? I think very often not, but that's what it is. We need to find ways how to use it and where to put limits. The size is an argument that, at least in the biobanking field, was already there early on in the 90s. We have fantastic potentiality because we have all those samples and data together. And now with the speed of AI and technology advancements, it becomes something new, because how can we ensure data quality if everything moves so fast and legislation, we don't know. That is something we need to capture. So maybe to take a deep breath, as I hope we do every day, and look at it, what is in for us, what do we want to achieve, and what do we not want to achieve. And that's the value discussion we as humans have to have. So I want to conclude with this AI-generated picture of what they think artistically a biobank is. A secured space, almost with a police logo shape. But also it looks like a little bit of a heart, so you can interpret anything in it that you want. And formally, I don't only want to say thank you for your attention, but also acknowledge the projects I was involved in that contributed to this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Micaela. Please have a seat. And now we'll have Ana. Ana Rodrigues is Professor of Epidemiology and Rheumatology at Nova Medical School and is the head of EpiDoc Research Unit. She is the coordinator of Reuma-PT, the National Register on Rheumatic Diseases from the Portuguese Society of Rheumatology. She completed the clinical scholar research training from Harvard Medical School, a training program on clinical research, and she is the scientific head of Nova Biobank. Please, Ana.
Thank you for the nice introduction. Particularly because you are my boss, so it's okay. It's nice to to hear this from you. So, what I'm going to try to do in the next 15 minutes is to share with you my experience while trying to build a valuable research infrastructure in Portugal, which is our biobank, our institutional biobank that is named Chain Biobank. And this is a sharing experience, because what I will try to explain to you was what we've done, all the mistakes and the things that probably you will see that are not perfect, but we are starting and we are trying to comply in this new era where the challenges are, by building these research infrastructures, are different than the ones 10 years ago, just as small as that. So I will just give a brief sign about what are these new era of biobanking in digital biobanks that, as Micaela already told, it's a way to integrate data. So biobank now is all about data and how can we preserve and reuse high-quality data in order to speed clinical research and have significant advances in health knowledge, and because our ultimate goal is to improve health from population and communities. And this is the first rule that all clinical research infrastructures have. I'm going to share with you what were the principles that we were inspired, that were the FAIR principles that should be implemented in registries and biobanks, and then share the experience of our own biobank. As I already spoke you, and everyone this morning also told you, reservoirs of health information have increased in the last 10 years almost in 50%, and will increase again. And as the previous speakers already told, the fact that we have a lot of data doesn't mean that we have good data, high quality data, and that the garbage that is being produced is a lot. So we need to try to use this new era of having data to produce valuable information for all of us. And we have a lot of barriers in terms of these our aims that needs to be considered. And well, I know that I'm speaking in a room that has a lot of lawyers, and will not try to address any issue of that, but many of the legislation is like that, is trying to protect privacy, human rights, and things like that. But we also have a barrier that Michele already told us, that is researchers. When they do research in the project and they have their own data, it's like a baby. And their babies they don't want to share their babies. But what we know in terms of that is that these infrastructures, well done with relevant data, can advance the knowledge in diagnosis, disease progression, risk factors really fast if we reuse this data. There's no need to again and again and again trying to, every time that I have a significant research question, I need to collect data for that, and do not reuse this data to other close questions. Of course, that is not for not specific research questions that cannot be answered by this kind of data, but the ones that make sense to be answered by this kind of data. And that's why digital biobanks, for me, are really important research infrastructures, because they collect, process, store, distribute biological specimens with associated data in an organized and governed manner. And these are the two words that I want to explain. That is really close with what Biden previously said in terms of quality, reusability, and things like that. So the digital biobanks are spaces that many times are virtual spaces where these molecular and health data and personal data come together in a secure, organized, and governed manner. And if we have this, we for sure can advance more fast in many hot topics in the medical field, like precision medicine, personalized medicine, answers to new treatments, to identify the better treatment to each patient. All of these challenges that we are facing today, we can answer if we do this right. So these places where we store all this data can be seen like these icebergs, that it comes since the first part where we ask the participant to share his data with us and with the clinical researchers for a purpose, and this informed clinical consent till the sample collection, till the health data storage, and where we can apply AI techniques to increase also the governance, the security, and the ability for us to use rightly these data. So, in terms of this fair data exchange and all the purposes of this research infrastructure is to exchange this information, we should apply the FAIR principles, which are the data should be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And what does this mean? This means that we need to implement and to structure the data that we have in a manner that is traceable, it's interoperable with others, but complying with the privacy of the individual, complying with all the data protection that we need to do. And now we have ways to do this, probably not perfect, but I think that we can improve this, but we need to start using these techniques. And one way that I particularly see that we can do this is just to try to modulate our data with layers of ETL things that are code, computer code, and do federated data networks with common language, with common representations that will help the application of all the machine learning techniques that researchers want to use to learn about things. So what I'm saying is that we can apply AI techniques, but in a very structured and high quality data, and avoid the garbage in, garbage out. So for that, in order to accomplish that, we need to make sure that the data that we have is at high quality, and the ones that are going to assess data and have questions to be answered in our different data sets completely know what was the purpose of each variable that we have in our data set, and how it was taken, how it was, who filled that data, it was the patient, it was the clinician. Everything about each variable should be accessible to all in order to have to memorize all this stuff. Because what we know in research is that if we integrate this knowledge of health records, imaging, microbiome, metabolites, omics, we for sure, and use these integrated biorepositories, for sure that we will advance in disease diagnosis, drug discovery, personalized treatment plans, remote monitoring systems, and predictive analytics. So with all these assumptions, what we have done is that in the beginning of 2024, this year, we have launched the chain biobank, that is an institutional biobank that is located at Nova Medical School. Our mission was to collect, process, store, reuse biological specimens with associated data, to promote and facilitate the development of new research projects among the CHRC research community with national and international institutions. And what we did in the last 4 years, before we launched the biobank, we have worked in this research infrastructure for 4 years these people that you are seeing here, with our data protection officer, with our ethical community, and our legal department, and we have a lot of discussions to try to provide setting a structure architecture with rules and governance that enables a safe management of this kind of data. And it took us 4 years, and for sure that we will change all these documents along the way, but 4 years to do this. So, before starting, we need to make sure that we were compliant with all the rules and ISO standards. And just to show you what we are a small biobank. We have a freezer room. We have 2 laboratories, one with sample processing and quality control, and one BioSL2 biosafety lab. And what we were completely concerned about was how our data storage, how we would make this data storage management. And this is where we are now. We choose a laboratory information management system that could be integrated with the other data that, health data that participants can have. And we are now in the process of constructing a data center that help us to deal with this data and to transform this data in a federated way in order for us to share safely with others. Till now we have sample collection of 1,759 participants, many from general population with other immune inflammatory chronic diseases, respiratory diseases and infection conditions. We have transparent rules for researchers for me, what are the major take-home messages is, while as a researcher, as a clinical researcher, while trying to implement a good research infrastructure, we need to comply with these fair principles of transparency, collaboration, privacy, and think that we people that coordinate data repositories are working from people to people. Thank you.
Now, is everyone in the audience that would like to the question, Vera?
Good. Thanks very much for 2 interesting presentations. Both of you were saying that there has been this overall trend in how one pitches biobanking, so it's not so much about the biological samples as now more about the data. But haven't biobanks always been there simply for the data? So I'm just wondering, is this development more a development sort of in terms of symbolics, or is it... or is there more practical implications there? And then also have a comment about data altruism, but maybe, yeah, I'm also a bit troubled with data altruism and this idea of sharing is caring. So if you're not sharing, then you're not caring. So reflections on that could be interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, you're completely right. Biobanking is data collection. But what happened was in the last, so in 20 years ago, all the concerns of the people who were coordinating biobanks were about how to storage high quality samples. So, of course, it's data, but they were really committed to have the major standards of the quality of the samples to be used by others, and the data was a problem of others. And now the coordination, the biobank coordination brings data management also for them. So it is not, it is also a mission and a task that the biobank coordination brings for them as curators of the data. That was not, so before the thinking was, I'm a curator of high quality samples. Now I'm a curator of high quality data.
I agree, and would only like to add that the amounts of data associated is increasing. And that puts even more prevalence on the argument of data quality and who is actually maintaining the data quality. Because in reality, at the source, when study nurses enter the data in form of clinical care, that's already the moment where it needs to be standardized. But in practice, this is hardly possible. So there is a lot of curation ongoing. And the hope is also that AI can help here in speeding it up in the clinic, so that only the quality control needs to be done in the biobank. And if I may follow up on your comment on data altruism, I could not agree more on your comment there as well with sharing is caring. I think this is a paternalistic argument. I don't think it is intended as such. I think it was more intended as a wonderful, easy way out. But of course, we know that this does not exist. And with the rights that we currently have in place for the individual, for vulnerable populations, it remains clearly a right to opt out. And that is also what happens within the EHDS. And I'm personally very much in favor of this opt-out because it allows easier at a certain moment in time to opt in. It does not put all the responsibility also on the citizen and patient as so many other things tend to do. And let's be honest, let's think of WhatsApp, Amazon, and Google. Who of us has read the terms and conditions? Just for the fun of it, I think the New York Times a couple of years back did do an exercise when reading out the terms of conditions of Amazon aloud, and it took them 7 hours.
I will start by saying that Lee Bygrave is the person I know that knows more about the GDPR. So every time I disagree with him, I think of myself, I might be stupid because I'm disagreeing. But I have to do this kind of very honest statement. I like the idea of data altruism. I also support the idea of data altruism with opt-out. I will not support the idea of an opt-in, as it was discussed at some time with the data space. But my question is about data altruism, and it's not a technical one, it's more like your opinion, because sometimes I think to myself, and maybe there are studies, I don't know, maybe there are studies. Why do you think people might not be willing to share their data? It's because I will call it like lack of digital or lack of data literacy, because they don't know what's going to happen, they don't know the protections. Basically, they are too far away of this topic, or they actually know, and it's a very conscient way to say, no, I don't want. I don't know, are there studies?
No, there are not, or not many of it. There are some speculations where people start to address that topic. My team also wanted to go in that direction, but the project was not funded or the calls did not fit. So in terms of reasons, I think all of the above, and you mentioned, and more, when it comes for people not wanting to share. What I think is, at the end, it doesn't matter. If they don't want to share, they have the reasons and they need to be respected. I personally also want to be altruistic, and I believe that many share their data or willing to share their data because of the higher good. At the same time, the moment it is suggesting that you're only a good citizen, and that's where I see the risk, if you share, then it becomes a paternalistic argument. And that is something we really have to think through, which currently at the moment has not happened. So it is simply a right, for whatever reason, not to share. And I believe also what you were saying, that we can increase it with health data literacy, we can increase it with good governance, but there will always remain, and we see this from other fields, some people who simply don't want to play the game for whatever reason. And in a free society, that has to remain the case. So I'm not criticizing the altruistic attitude, but I'm criticizing of politicizing data altruism.
I agree with Michaela, and I'm going to share with you my experience, which is so low level of evidence when we share experience and not high quality data. But well, probably, so I have recruited for many kind of research, even for biobanking, but also for other kind of research participants. And so more thousands and thousands, a lot of people really. And in my experience, the vast majority of people is willing to share data for a better good, for sure. But the problem is if, so what I think is otherwise is when, so the freedom and the right should be there. So the thing that participants should not need to say why they are not willing to share. They need to have this freedom. And three things that helps people to not be afraid, because as you know, we have research has a lot of ethical concerns, and they are not so long ago. So, even in present, there are a lot of ethical concerns in terms of research, because it's for the better good. But as I always say, and I'm a Star Wars lover, so sorry, there is a good for every advance. This can be used for the good or for the bad side of the force. So it's really important for us to know that. And three things that make people is when we give them time to think about it, when we don't have 50 pages for them to understand what is this informed concern, when we give them explainable reasons and really narrow objectives for their sharing, and when also we don't ask why not. And this is about freedom and rights.
Thank you. Thank you. Very nice and interesting discussion. I would just like to bring the topic of also seeing this from the perspective of the scientist or the actual producer of the data, because I've gone through that as a researcher as well myself. And one of the things is that it goes beyond the topic of, or at least it's much more complex, because, for example, I think also the funding scheme is also impacting a lot the scientists. And one example of that is that, for example, one PhD student can just take the entire PhD building up the way, which is a very complex way to actually acquire good data. And we were talking about good data, that is, it's what matters for example, AI and all the other type of discoveries that we might do. So this poor PhD student has gone through this painful process, and at the end there's just this data analyst postdoc that comes and just looks at the data easily and publishes as a first author paper. and then all the credit is given to actually the data analyst and not the data producer. So I think that's a major infrastructure that has to be addressed from the also funding, academic recognition, which is there's a lot of effort to, and sometimes they are the best scientists and the best students we have, the ones that collect really good data, but by the end of the day is actually the one that gets the results out that has the credit. And I think this goes beyond like some of the topics that are here, but this is also going against these fair principles, because a lot of people are also not willing to put all this effort to then not having any credit.
I could not agree more, and I would like to open discussion, the discussion to other dimensions. Well, first, I don't have a solution for that, but we have to have the talk about it in various ways. What it shows is that science today is multidisciplinary, and the credit systems are so varied and different. And here's another element which I love, but I also criticize, that is open science. Because in its most liberal interpretation, it means somebody produces the data and it is then open and free for everybody, and this is a democratic tool. When we closer look at it, no, it is not, because there are economic conditions, institutional conditions at play. Is there the time, knowledge, expertise, and usually computational tools at hand to actually tap into the data? So there has to come a credit system, but also an access system, how we can manage that. Within the biobanking field, we've long had the discussion, because when building up biobanks, well, very often the imaginary was that all the data and samples are collected now, and then you just tap into them endlessly. The reality is, of course, it's a living thing. It grows, it moves. There are multiple collections that have multiple curators, godfathers, godmothers. I definitely don't say owners, but it feels, of course, to the scientists, to them, like that, because they put blood, sweat, and tears in putting it together. Now, the good governance model is that those collections can be used by those who put them together if in a certain time frame nothing happens with it, which is very often a funding thing, because there was one project or several projects that allowed to put it together, but there is no follow-up project to do the research, so that resource is sitting there in the biobank, and then if, say, after 10 years nothing has happened, well, then let's open it up. That is one of the models with an access committee and all the ethical oversight to ensure that. But in developing that further, I think still a lot has to be done.
Yes, please.
What you just told us, it's quite informative, actually. And I was thinking, in terms of infrastructure, whether the different biobanks, at least in Europe, have a very close communication on best practices, and especially on keeping the samples safe when maybe the power goes down or something like that. And if the two of you have communicated all these best practices.
Well, I did not have previously communicated with Michaela, but we have communicated with this European network that she represents, and so we have communicated with other person, and all biobanks try to have these good practice standards that are so we all comply with that, but the other, in terms of that, things like when the power goes out and things like that, and how to process data. But what we were also discussing is about data governance. And in that field, this is not a so clear pathway, and each biobank has their own specific governance. Of course, that we are inspired by each other, but even in that field, what I think, my personal view, is that we need to adapt to our reality. So this data construction has a lot of different realities, like so many times biobanking are being constructed by PhD students, others by companies. So the data is collected and the effort is made by in different ways. So the management and governance of these samples and sharing these samples should be adjusted to these close realities. That's why I think probably we need to have some principles, but there are many specificities. I don't know, what do you think about this?
Again, I agree, and I can only add to that. That is, I mean, BioMed-AI's research infrastructure was formed in order to allow that platform that if a member state becomes a member, that the member state Ministry of Research typically would also fund a national biobank network, not the biobanks itself, but kind of a network that allows the national biobanks to talk to each other, that then feeds on the European scale, where we talk about standards, common best practices, but also agree on what are minimal standards. We manage that for the BioMed-AI directory, where certain codes allow you to find in a standardized way the biobanks there. But still an amazing lot needs to be done, because there's still not one entry point. So I think everybody underestimated what a long time it takes, and I could not agree more that whatever the specifics are local. And they will always remain local because of the law, because of the culture, because of the scientific orientation. Say there are rare disease samples, then this is your strength, then other aspects apply. And I can invite you, of course, to join BioMed-AI, but also all other initiatives and biobanking conferences, because everybody in variations shares the same problem, and nobody, unless there was a national strategy, loads of money, years of conceptualization in form of a national biobank with a business plan, then there is one question that you can solve. But when we talk about especially biobanks coming from the clinic, they grew organically. They have to serve also the local purpose of being an archive of diagnostic samples. And in that sense, their orientation and strategy will always be local, but it also means that there is not one way, but very often what can be done with the data, what are the access conditions, are negotiated each and every time. And I think that is the development that also happens now. Let's limit that maybe to 3-4 options rather than everything and tailor-made and use case specific.
Just another informative thing, that is, in Portugal we have a national network of biobanks. That is recognized by the government, but not financed. And we are struggling and maintaining each other with regular meetings because of all these constraints that we are speaking. But I completely agree. I think we should have a national network, and then an European, and then a global network, like we have in registries. So I have experience with registries. That's why I accepted this challenge to build this biorepository data, because we have a national registry on rheumatic diseases, and what we have done is, it was like this. So use health data locally in each hospital. So we have 80 hospitals that share where we collect these data. Then we have a national, that is the one that I'm coordinating. Then we have integrated the European registry, and then now we are constructing a global one with worldwide. And if we do this using the same principles, for sure that we will have high quality data and useful and important data to make clinical discoveries.
Thank you so much, Michaela and Anna, for this excellent presentation. Thank you so much.